Hey guys, tonight we begin with the surprisingly mundane and oddly captivating world of Antelope. Those graceful creatures who spend their days doing absolutely nothing exciting, yet somehow manage to survive in some of the harshest environments on Earth. While nature documentaries make them look majestic, the truth is, being an antelope is mind-numbingly repetitive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first week of existence plays out like a poorly directed slapstick comedy, except the audience consists entirely of creatures who might eat you if you're not entertaining enough. Learning to nurse turns out to be significantly more complicated than advertised. Your mother, bless her increasingly frayed patience, stands there like a walking milk dispenser while you attempt to figure out basic mechanics. The problem is that breakfast keeps moving. Every time you think you've got the hang of it, she shifts her weight or takes a step, and suddenly you're face first in grass, wondering if this is what humiliation tastes like. Spoiler alert, it tastes like dirt and disappointment. You watch your siblings, those smug little show-offs, latch on with the confidence of seasoned professionals. Meanwhile, you're still trying to determine which end of your mother produces food and which end produces things you definitely don't want to eat. It's like trying to operate heavy machinery while blindfolded, except the machinery is your own face and the stakes are not starving to death. The nursing situation improves marginally by day 3, though you still approach each meal with the coordination of someone trying to thread a needle while riding a unicycle. Your mother develops what can only be described as the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's begun questioning her life choices. Your first attempts at grazing are even more spectacular in their failure. The concept seems simple enough. Bend head down, eat grass, repeat until satisfied. What nobody mentions is that grass has an annoying tendency to be attached to the ground, and the ground has an unfortunate habit of being lower than you initially calculated. You spend your first grazing session mostly eating dirt with occasional grass garnish, like some sort of demented earthen salad. The dirt tastes exactly like you'd expect earthy, with notes of regret and a finish that makes you question every decision that led to this moment. You watch the adults around you munching contentedly, and you wonder if there's some secret grass-eating technique they forgot to mention in orientation. By the end of the week, you've mastered the art of getting approximately 30% grass, 40% dirt, and 30% confusion into your mouth with each bite. The adults pretend not to notice your technique, which is kind of them, considering you look like you're trying to eat the entire savannah, one painful mouthful at a time. The watering hole becomes your daily theatre of embarrassment. It's where everyone gathers not just to drink, but apparently to judge your terrible drinking technique. The concept of drinking should be straightforward. Water goes in mouth, gets swallowed, everybody lives another day. Yet somehow you've managed to turn it into performance art. You approach the water's edge with all the confidence of someone who has never seen water before, which, to be fair, you basically haven't. The adults wade in with casual grace, dipping their heads and drinking with the fluid movements of creatures who figured out this whole staying alive business. You, on the other hand, step into the water like you're entering a pit of liquid snakes. Your first attempt at drinking results in you essentially waterboarding yourself. You plunge your entire head underwater with the enthusiasm of someone who doesn't understand how breathing works, then emerge sputtering and confused, wondering why the water tastes like panic and wet regret. The other antelopes continue drinking politely, but you can sense their judgment radiating across the water like disappointed heat waves. Social hierarchy discovery happens with all the subtlety of a falling tree. You learn that in the grand pecking order of antelope society, you occupy a position somewhere between insignificant and actively problematic. The bottom of the hierarchy, you discover, is surprisingly crowded apparently. Everyone can't be in charge, which seems like poor planning on evolution's part. The adult males regard you with the kind of benign indifference usually reserved for particularly boring rocks. The adult females treat you like a small, mobile hazard that might wander into traffic at any moment. Your own age cohort operates on a simple principle. Whoever can stand up longest without falling over gets to be in charge until they inevitably fall over, at which point leadership defaults to whoever's still conscious. You quickly learn that respect must be earned, and earning respect requires skills you don't yet possess, like walking in a straight line and not eating poisonous plants. Until you master these advanced techniques, you'll remain at the bottom of the social ladder, which is fine, because the view from down here includes a lot of other creatures' legs and the occasional dropped piece of food. Your position in the hierarchy comes with certain perks, like being the first to know when everyone else is about to run away, and the last to know why. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and honestly, you're not qualified for anything more demanding anyway. By your first month, you've graduated from completely helpless to only moderately hopeless, which represents significant progress in the Antelope Personal Development Program. Growing pains hit you with the subtlety of a meteorite impact. Your legs seem to be having an ongoing argument with the rest of your body about proportions, timing, and basic physics. One day, you wake up and discover that your legs have grown 3 inches overnight, but nobody bothered to inform your brain about this development. Walking becomes an exercise in theoretical physics. You send the signal to move forward, but your legs interpret this as perform interpretive dance about falling down. Your body resembles something assembled by a committee of well-meaning but drunk engineers. Your legs are too long for your torso, your neck seems to belong to a different animal entirely, and your tail appears to have been attached as an afterthought by someone who wasn't entirely sure what tails are supposed to do. You move through the world like a marionette operated by someone with severe arthritis. The growing pains aren't just metaphorical. Your bones ache with the constant effort of becoming longer, your muscles struggle to keep up with your expanding frame, and your coordination suffers accordingly. You spend your days feeling like you're wearing someone else's body, and it doesn't fit properly. Every step is a negotiation between what you intend to do and what your limbs decide to do instead. Sleep becomes complicated because your legs no longer fit in the same positions they did last week. You fold yourself into increasingly complex configurations, trying to find an arrangement that doesn't result in you waking up with a crick in your neck or a hoof in your ear. Your mother watches these contortions with the weary patience of someone who's been through this before. Learning the alarm calls proves more challenging than graduate-level linguistics. There are, as it turns out, approximately 47 different ways to say run, and you need to know them all if you want to maintain your current status as alive. The complexity of the system suggests that antelopes take their paranoia very seriously indeed. There's the casual, something's probably fine, but maybe we should wander over there, call, which sounds like a gentle clearing of the throat. Then there's the, okay, now I'm actually concerned, call, which carries a note of genuine worry. The we should definitely be somewhere else right now call has an urgency that makes your spine tingle. And finally, there's the run for your actual life call, which sounds like someone screaming through a kazoo made of pure terror. You practice these calls with the dedication of a conservatory student, but your attempts sound like a rusty gate being operated by someone having an allergic reaction. The adults listen to your efforts with the kind of polite attention usually reserved for children's piano recitals, supportive, but clearly hoping it will end soon. The subtleties of the system escape you entirely. Apparently, the same call can mean different things depending on who's making it, what time of day it is, and whether there's a slight breeze from the southeast. It's like learning a language where every word has 17 different meanings, and the context clues are written in invisible ink. Your first successful escape comes courtesy of a particularly aggressive butterfly, which sounds less heroic than it actually felt at the time. The butterfly, a large, orange creature with the territorial instincts of a warlord, decides that you're invading its personal space, which apparently extends roughly 3 acres in every direction. It begins its assault with reconnaissance flybys, circling you like a tiny, colourful fighter pilot. You, not being familiar with butterfly warfare, assume it's just being friendly. This assumption lasts approximately 30 seconds, until it dive bombs your left ear with the precision of a guided missile. What follows can only be described as a chase scene from an action movie. If action movies featured protagonists who were afraid of insects, you bolt across the savannah with all the grace of a shopping cart with a broken wheel, the butterfly in hot pursuit, apparently committed to this battle for reasons known only to itself. Your escape technique involves a lot of zigzagging, several undignified stumbles, and what can generously be called creative navigation. You bound through tall grass, leap over small bushes, and perform what might charitably be described as evasive maneuvers. The butterfly, for its part, maintains pursuit with the relentless determination of a creature that has nothing better to do. The chase ends when you accidentally run through a spiderweb, which apparently counts as neutral territory in the ongoing butterfly-antelope conflict. The butterfly, either satisfied with its victory or confused by the sudden change in venue, decides to call it a draw and flutters off to terrorize someone else. You stand there, covered in spider silk and breathing hard, realizing that you've just successfully escaped from your first predator. Granted, it was a predator, roughly 1,000th your size, that posed no actual threat to anything except your dignity. But still, you ran, you escaped, you lived to graze another day. The art of camouflage, you discover, involves standing very still and hoping you look like a slightly furry rock. This technique works approximately never, but you practice it anyway because the adults seem to think it's important, and you're not in a position to argue with their survival expertise. Your camouflage attempts consist mainly of freezing in place whenever you think something might be looking at you, which, given your current level of paranoia, is approximately every 30 seconds. You stand motionless among the grass, trying to blend in with the landscape, which would work better if you weren't the color of weak tea and the grass wasn't the color of strong coffee. The other antelopes watch your camouflage efforts with what can only be described as bemused tolerance. They understand that you're trying your best, and that your best currently resembles someone playing the world's most obvious game of hide and seek. They don't actively discourage you, which is kind of them, considering your camouflage technique makes you about as inconspicuous as a disco ball in a library. The dry season arrives like an unwelcome relative who's planning to stay for several months and has strong opinions about everything. The grass, which had been maintaining a respectable green color, begins its slow transformation into something that looks like nature's attempt at making breakfast cereal. The grass turns the color of your hopes and dreams. Brown. Not a rich, chocolate brown that might be pleasant to look at, but the particular shade of brown that suggests things are not going according to plan. It's the brown of abandoned projects, missed opportunities, and weather reports that keep promising rain next week maybe. You watch this transformation with the fascination of someone witnessing their first apocalypse. Yesterday, the world was green and full of promise. Today, it looks like someone spilled coffee over everything and then forgot to clean it up. The adult antelopes accept this change with the weary resignation of creatures who've seen this show before. But for you, it's like watching the world die in slow motion. The brown grass tastes exactly like it looks disappointed. It crunches between your teeth with the enthusiasm of stale crackers, and it leaves you feeling like you've just eaten a mouthful of crushed expectations. You find yourself missing the green grass with an intensity that surprises you. Who knew you could develop such strong opinions about plant pigmentation? Water becomes more precious than whatever antelopes consider precious, which, given that most of your possessions consist of your own body parts, means water becomes extremely precious indeed. The watering holes that had seemed vast and inexhaustible begin to shrink like puddles on hot pavement. You watch the water level drop day by day, marked by increasingly obvious rings around the banks like bathtub stains of desperation. The adults begin to discuss water sources with the urgency of people planning military operations, which, in a sense, they are. The difference between knowing where water is and not knowing where water is turns out to be the difference between life and a very uncomfortable death. Long walks to distant watering holes become your new daily routine, like hiking, but with more existential dread. These aren't pleasant nature walks where you admire the scenery and contemplate the beauty of the natural world. These are forced marches through increasingly barren landscape, driven by the biological imperative to not die of thirst. The walks stretch longer each day as the closer water sources dry up. Your legs, already dealing with the ongoing challenge of being longer than you remember them being, now must carry you across distances that seem designed to test your commitment to staying alive. You begin to understand why the adults spend so much time talking about water. It's because water is basically everything. The landscape during these walks looks like someone took a photograph of paradise and left it too close to a heater. Everything is the same shade of brown, from the grass to the dirt to your increasingly pessimistic mood. The sun beats down with the intensity of a cosmic bully, and the horizon shimmers with heat waves that make the distance look like it's having an anxiety attack. Learning to read the sky becomes a crucial survival skill, though the sky's message remains depressingly consistent. Still no rain, sorry. You stare upward hopefully each morning, looking for clouds that might suggest relief is coming. But the sky maintains its relentless blue optimism, apparently unaware of the crisis developing below. The few clouds that do appear are the meteorological equivalent of window shopping. They look promising from a distance, but when you examine them closely, you realize they're just atmospheric decoration with no intention of actually producing water. They drift by like advertising for a product that's permanently out of stock. You develop an intimate relationship with the sky's moods and expressions. You learn to distinguish between definitely no rain blue and absolutely no rain blue. You become an expert in cloud classification, though most of your categories fall under the general heading of insufficiently rain-producing. The adult antelopes watch your sky-reading attempts with patient encouragement, knowing that hope is sometimes the only entertainment available. They've learned to manage their expectations regarding weather, but they remember what it was like to believe that staring at the sky hard enough might actually make it rain. The dry season, you realize, is less a season and more a test of character. It asks fundamental questions about your commitment to existence and your willingness to walk very long distances for increasingly questionable water. So far, you're passing, but it's not a comfortable grade. Herd politics, you discover, are surprisingly complex for creatures who spend most of their time eating grass and trying not to die. The social structure operates on principles that seem to have been designed by someone who read half of a sociology textbook and then improvised the rest, while under the influence of fermented fruit. At the top of the hierarchy sit the adult males, who've earned their positions through a combination of horn size, attitude, and the kind of confidence that comes from having survived multiple seasons without being eaten. They carry themselves with the dignity of creatures who know exactly where they stand in the cosmic order, which is apparently in charge of things. Below them, the adult females form a complex network of alliances, rivalries, and shared responsibilities that would make a political scientist weep with joy. They make the real decisions about when to move, where to graze, and which water sources are worth the walk, but they allow the males to believe they're in charge because it keeps everyone happy and reduces unnecessary drama. Your peer group operates on simpler principles. Whoever can stand up without falling over for the longest period gets to make decisions until they inevitably fall over, at which point leadership rotates to whoever's still conscious. It's democracy in its purest form, if democracy was based entirely on physical coordination and attention span. Making friends turns out to involve mostly standing near other antelopes and hoping they don't run away when they notice you're there. This strategy works about as well as it sounds, which is to say, not very well at all, but it's the only strategy you've got, so you stick with it. You practice the art of casual proximity, trying to position yourself close enough to other young antelopes to seem friendly, but not so close that they feel obligated to acknowledge your existence. It's a delicate balance, requiring the social skills of a diplomat and the spatial awareness of someone who understands personal boundaries. Your attempts at friendship mostly consist of parallel grazing, eating grass near other antelopes who are also eating grass, occasionally looking up to make eye contact that suggests you're open to conversation, but not desperate for it. It's like being at a very boring cocktail party where everyone's too polite to leave, but not quite interested enough to actually talk. The pecking order reveals itself through a series of subtle interactions that are about as subtle as a falling tree. Spoiler alert, you're getting pecked. Not literally, because antelopes don't actually peck, but metaphorically. And metaphorical pecking turns out to hurt just as much as the real thing. Your position in the social hierarchy becomes clear through a variety of small indignities. You're always the last to know about good grazing spots. You get the water that's muddy from everyone else drinking first. When the herd moves, you end up at the back, eating dust and following hoofprints, trying to figure out where everyone else decided to go. The pecking order isn't malicious, it's just the natural result of having limited resources and unlimited antelopes trying to access them. Someone has to be last, and that someone, more often than not, is you. You accept this position with the philosophical resignation of someone who doesn't have better options. First romantic stirrings manifest as awkward staring contests that nobody wins. You find yourself noticing other young antelopes in ways that feel both important and completely mystifying. Suddenly, certain individuals seem more interesting than others, though you can't quite articulate why. These early romantic encounters consist mainly of looking at each other across patches of grass, trying to seem attractive while simultaneously eating, which proves more challenging than anticipated. You attempt to graze seductively, which is probably not a real thing, but you're giving it your best effort anyway. The staring contests end when one of you gets distracted by food, danger, or the basic challenge of standing upright, leaving both parties wondering what just happened and whether it means anything. Romance, you're learning, is complicated even when you don't fully understand what romance is supposed to be. Your horns start growing with all the fanfare of a houseplant achieving consciousness. One morning you wake up and discover tiny pointed bumps emerging from your skull like the world's most boring superpowers manifesting. They're currently the size of coffee stirrers, but they're your coffee stirrers, and for the first time in your brief existence, you have something to be genuinely proud of. You spend considerable time examining your reflection in still water, turning your head at various angles to catch the light just right on your magnificent horn nubs. They're barely visible. Really, if someone squinted at you from a great distance while having vision problems, they might mistake them for unusually pointy ears. But you know they're there, and that knowledge fills you with the kind of quiet satisfaction usually reserved for completing jigsaw puzzles or successfully opening jars. The other young antelopes regard your horns with the respect due to someone who's clearly moving up in the world. Those without horns yet look at you with undisguised envy, while those whose horns are slightly larger pretend not to notice yours, which is the antelope equivalent of feigning indifference to your success. You practice pointing your head at meaningful angles, trying to maximize the intimidation factor of your tiny protrusions. Your mother observes your horn-related pride with the patient amusement of someone who remembers being excited about small achievements. She doesn't mention that your horns currently pose about as much threat as a pair of enthusiastic toothpicks, because she's kind, and because everyone deserves to feel impressive at least once during their awkward adolescence. Coordination improves with the steady persistence of erosion reshaping mountains. You can now run in mostly the right direction, which represents a significant upgrade from your previous running style, which could best be described as panicked interpretive dance. Your legs have begun to cooperate with your brain in a loose partnership based on mutual tolerance rather than active collaboration. The improvement is incremental but noticeable. Where once you would bolt in whichever direction your momentum carried you, like a furry pinball with anxiety issues, you can now make deliberate choices about your trajectory. You can run toward water sources instead of away from them. You can avoid running directly into trees most of the time. You can even change direction mid-sprint without falling over, though this advanced maneuver still requires considerable concentration and favorable wind conditions. Your running style develops its own character, part gazelle, part shopping cart with a wobbly wheel, all determination. You lack the fluid grace of the adults, but you make up for it with enthusiasm and the kind of reckless confidence that comes from not fully understanding the dangers you're running from. Speed training becomes life's way of testing your commitment to staying alive, and you approach these tests with the dedication of someone who's recently figured out that the alternative to passing is being eaten. The savannah operates as a natural gymnasium, where the equipment is trying to kill you, and the membership fee is constant vigilance. Your speed improves through practical application, predator encounters, false alarms, and the occasional need to reach water before someone else drinks it all. Each sprint teaches you something new about your capabilities and limitations. You learn that you can run faster than you thought possible when properly motivated, which is usually when something with teeth is expressing interest in your continued existence. The adults time your runs with the critical eye of coaches who understand that graduation from their program involves not becoming lunch. They offer advice through demonstration. When they run, you run. When they stop, you wonder why, but eventually stop too. When they look concerned, you start looking for the nearest exit. You develop different running speeds for different occasions: the casual trot for everyday travel, the concerned canter for when something feels off, the serious gallop for confirmed threats, and the absolute sprint for when death is introducing itself personally. Mastering these speeds and knowing when to deploy them becomes crucial to your ongoing survival project. The teenage growth spurt hits with all the subtlety of a meteorological event. Your legs grow faster than your ability to control them, turning each day into a negotiation between what you intend to do and what your body decides to do instead. You wake up each morning slightly taller and significantly more confused about how your own limbs work. This growth spurt transforms you into a living experiment in proportion and physics. Your legs extend like telescopes operated by someone with no understanding of telescopes, while the rest of your body struggles to keep up with the new dimensions. You move through the world like someone wearing stilts for the first time. If stilts were attached directly to your skeleton and couldn't be removed, simple activities become complex challenges. Walking requires active concentration, as if you're manually operating each leg rather than trusting them to figure things out independently. Lying down involves careful planning to ensure all your new length fits in the available space. Standing up becomes a multi-step process that resembles someone assembling furniture without consulting the instructions. The other antelopes watch your growth spurt with the understanding sympathy of creatures who've either experienced this awkwardness themselves or are watching it happen to their own offspring. They don't laugh, exactly, but there's a certain gentle amusement in their eyes when you try to drink water and discover that your head is now much farther from the ground than you calculated. Your coordination slowly adapts to your new dimensions, like a software update that takes several weeks to install properly. Eventually, your brain begins to understand the new parameters of your physical existence. though this process involves considerable trial and error. Most of it error. Advanced grazing becomes your introduction to the complex world of botanical risk assessment. You discover that the savanna operates like a vast salad bar, where half the options are delicious, a quarter are merely edible, and the remainder will kill you in interesting ways. Learning to distinguish between these categories proves more challenging than a college-level chemistry course, with higher stakes and fewer office hours. Your education begins with the basics. Green plants are generally safer than brown plants, but this rule has more exceptions than a tax code written by someone with a cruel sense of humor. Some brown plants are perfectly fine, just unfashionably colored, while certain green plants contain enough toxins to make you question your life choices for however long you have left to question anything. You develop a methodical approach to new vegetation that involves extensive sniffing, cautious nibbling, and watching other antelopes to see if they fall over after eating something. This process takes considerable time, but it's time well invested in not accidentally poisoning yourself with your own dinner. The adults share their botanical wisdom through a combination of demonstration and intervention. They'll steer you away from dangerous plants with the gentle but firm guidance of people who understand that education is important, but not dying is more important. They watch your grazing experiments with the alert attention of people supervising someone handling explosives. You learn to read the subtle signs that distinguish safe grass from potentially problematic grass. Safe grass has a certain smell, a particular texture, and grows in specific locations with good drainage and adequate sunlight. Dangerous grass often looks exactly the same, but has an attitude problem that manifests in chemical warfare against anyone foolish enough to eat it. Navigation basics involve learning that all grass looks the same, but some grass leads to water, and that distinction can mean the difference between a pleasant afternoon and a very unpleasant death. The savanna presents itself as an endless expanse of repetitive scenery, like someone wallpapered the entire world with variations on a theme of brown and green plants under blue sky. Your first navigation lessons focus on landmarks that don't move around when you're not looking at them. The large acacia tree with the distinctive bent branch becomes your North Star, a fixed point in a world where everything else seems to shift position based on your emotional state and hydration level. You learn to navigate by distinctive rocks, unusual termite mounds, and the occasional dead tree that's managed to maintain its individual character even in death. Reading the landscape becomes a skill that combines observation, memory, and educated guessing. You learn that certain types of grass grow near water sources, that specific bird behaviors indicate the presence of predators, and that the lay of the land can tell you stories about where water flows during the rainy season, even when the rainy season feels like a theoretical concept. The adults teach you to think like water when looking for water flowing downhill, collecting in low places, following the path of least resistance. You begin to understand the subtle topography of seemingly flat land, noticing the gentle slopes and shallow depressions that guide water across the landscape like a very slow, very large river system. Predator identification becomes a crucial life skill that's significantly more complex than the simple taxonomy of things that want to eat you versus things that don't. The savanna hosts an impressive variety of creatures interested in your nutritional value, each with their own hunting strategies, preferred times of operation, and levels of competence. Lions occupy the top tier of your worry hierarchy, apex predators with the confidence that comes from being nearly unstoppable killing machines. They move with the casual grace of creatures who know they can catch you whenever they feel like making the effort. When you see lions, the appropriate response is immediate and sustained panic in whichever direction takes you farthest from their current location. Cheetahs represent a different category of threat faster than anything should legally be allowed to be, but with the stamina of someone who sprints everywhere and crashes hard afterward. They're specialized for brief, explosive hunts, which means your survival strategy involves either avoiding them entirely or making them work harder than they're willing to work for lunch. Wild dogs operate as a team-based nightmare that combines the persistence of debt collectors with the coordination of a military unit. They hunt in packs with the methodical efficiency of creatures who've turned killing into a professional sport. When you encounter wild dogs, your best hope is that they're already occupied with someone else's tragedy. You learn to distinguish between predators who are actively hunting and predators who are just passing through your neighborhood. A lion, walking purposefully toward you, requires immediate evacuation, while a lion lying in the shade, looking bored, might be willing to let you continue existing, provided you don't do anything interesting enough to attract attention. The fine art of panic becomes your most essential survival skill, involving when to run, how fast, and in which direction. Panic, you discover, is not just screaming and running randomly, it's a sophisticated response system that can mean the difference between becoming someone else's dinner and living to panic another day. Proper panic begins with threat assessment. Not every concerning situation requires maximum panic. Some situations call for mild concern, others demand moderate alarm, and only the truly dire circumstances justify full-scale existential terror. Learning to calibrate your panic response appropriately prevents you from exhausting yourself with false alarms while ensuring you can access maximum panic when genuinely needed. Direction selection during panic involves reading the landscape, understanding predator behavior, and making rapid decisions about which way offers the best combination of escape routes and places to hide. Running toward water might help if you can swim and the predator can't, but it might also trap you if the predator is amphibious and you're not. Speed management during panic requires balancing the need to move quickly with the need to conserve energy for sustained flight. Sprinting at maximum speed works for short distances, but if you're dealing with persistent predators, you need to pace yourself like a marathon runner who's being chased by something that wants to eat them. You practice panic scenarios during quiet moments, visualizing escape routes and rehearsing responses to different threats. This mental preparation proves invaluable when actual panic situations arise, because panic is much more effective when you've thought about it in advance rather than improvising in real time while terrified. Your first proper chase comes courtesy of a young cheetah who's clearly new to this whole hunting thing, which makes two of you learning important life skills under pressure. The encounter begins like most life-changing events, with you doing something completely ordinary. In this case, grazing peacefully while contemplating the philosophical implications of grass. The cheetah appears at the edge of your vision like a golden question mark with uncertain intentions. It's obviously young, roughly your age in predator years, and it's studying you with the intense concentration of someone taking their first driving test. You can practically see it running through a mental checklist. Step 1, identify prey. Step 2, approach prey. Step 3. What was step 3 again? The chase begins with both of you making rookie mistakes. The cheetah starts its approach too early and from too far away, giving you plenty of time to notice its presence and begin your own mental preparations for fleeing. You, meanwhile, spend several precious seconds staring back at it, as if politeness requires you to acknowledge its hunting attempt before running away. When you finally begin running, it becomes clear that neither of you is quite ready for this level of responsibility. The cheetah runs with the enthusiasm of someone who's heard that cheetahs are supposed to be fast, but hasn't quite figured out how to translate that reputation into practical results. You run with the determination of someone who's recently learned that being caught has negative consequences for your continued existence. The chase develops into something resembling a nature documentary filmed by people who aren't quite sure how nature documentaries are supposed to work. The cheetah gains ground during straightaways, but loses focus around turns. You maintain steady speed, but make navigation errors that would be embarrassing if you weren't currently running for your life. The pursuit ends when you both reach a rocky outcropping that neither of you had planned for. The cheetah, faced with terrain that doesn't suit its hunting style, pauses to reconsider its life choices. You, breathing hard and grateful for unexpected obstacles, take the opportunity to put several large rocks between yourself and your pursuer. The cheetah eventually wanders off to find prey that requires less effort, and you remain among the rocks until your heart rate returns to normal. Getting separated from the herd provides you with a masterclass in existential terror that no amount of preparation could have adequately prepared you for. It happens during a routine water run. One moment you're following the familiar rumps of your family members. The next moment you're alone in a landscape that suddenly seems much larger and significantly more hostile. The separation occurs during a false alarm that sends everyone scattering in different directions. A ground squirrel, startled by something you never identify, makes an alarm call that triggers the standard panic response. Everyone runs, but in the confusion of dust and hoofbeats, you end up following the wrong group of fleeing antelopes until they veer off toward their own territory, leaving you standing alone in unfamiliar grass. The silence that follows feels heavier than sound. Without the constant background noise of your herd, the gentle conversations, the rhythmic chewing, the occasional snorts and sighs, the world becomes unnaturally quiet. Every sound seems amplified and potentially threatening. A bird landing on a branch sounds like a predator approaching. Wind through grass resembles something breathing nearby. You experience loneliness as a physical sensation, like hunger but located in your chest instead of your stomach. The vastness of the savannah, which had seemed comforting when you were part of a group, now feels oppressive and dangerous. You're a small, edible creature in a large world, full of things that consider you a potential meal, and you no longer have the security of numbers. Finding your way back becomes an exercise in applied optimism and basic navigation skills you're not entirely sure you possess. You follow your nose, hoping it knows more than you do about tracking familiar scents across landscapes that all look remarkably similar when you're lost and scared. Your nose, fortunately, proves more competent than your conscious mind at solving navigation problems. It picks up the faint trail of your herd's passage, a complex mixture of familiar body odors, disturbed vegetation, and the lingering scent of home that you'd never noticed when you were surrounded by it constantly. Following the scent trail requires patience and frequent backtracking when you lose the thread. You move slowly across the landscape, stopping frequently to sample the air and confirm you're still heading in the right direction. The trail sometimes disappears entirely, forcing you to cast around in expanding circles until you pick it up again. The reunion with your herd occurs with the understated drama typical of antelope social interactions. You simply walk over a small rise and find them grazing in a valley below, looking exactly as they had when you'd last seen them, as if your terrifying adventure had been a private experience that didn't affect the rest of the world. Your mother glances up as you approach, acknowledges your return with a brief sniff to confirm you're uninjured, and returns to her grazing with the calm acceptance of someone who always knew you'd figure things out eventually. The other herd members treat your return as unremarkable, which is somehow both disappointing and deeply comforting. The celebration of survival takes the form of standing around eating grass, but with purpose. There's something different about this grazing session, a quality of attention and appreciation that hadn't been there before. The grass tastes like grass, but it also tastes like home, like safety, like the simple pleasure of being alive in a dangerous world. You eat slowly, savoring not just the food but the presence of familiar bodies around you, the security of numbers, the comfort of belonging somewhere. The ordinary sounds of communal grazing, chewing, occasional snorts, the gentle shuffle of hooves, seem like music composed specifically to celebrate your successful return to the world of the living. The rains come like a blessing wrapped in inconvenience, transforming your world from a brown testament to endurance into a green explosion of possibilities and problems. The first drops fall with the dramatic timing of a theatrical production, arriving just when you'd begun to suspect that water was a theoretical concept invented by optimistic meteorologists. You experience your first real rainstorm, with the wonder of someone discovering that the sky can actually deliver on its promises, even if those promises come with terms and conditions that nobody bothered to explain in advance. The rain starts as a whisper of moisture that makes you look up hopefully, progresses to a gentle patter that seems too good to be true, and eventually becomes a deluge that makes you question whether there might be such a thing as too much of a good thing. The transformation begins immediately, as if the landscape has been waiting months for permission to stop pretending to be a desert. Within hours, tiny green shoots emerge from soil that had seemed permanently committed to being brown. The air fills with the scent of growing things, a smell so rich and complex it makes you realize you'd forgotten what hope smells like. Everything turns green, including things that probably shouldn't. Plants that had been hiding underground for months suddenly burst forth with the enthusiasm of guests arriving at a party they've been looking forward to all year. Vines appear overnight, wrapping around rocks and trees with aggressive cheerfulness. Flowers bloom in improbable places, as if the rain has given them permission to be ridiculously optimistic. The water pools in depressions you hadn't noticed during the dry season, creating temporary lakes that reflect the sky like mirrors scattered across the landscape. These impromptu water features attract not just your herd, but every creature within walking distance, turning peaceful watering holes into social gatherings that resemble outdoor concerts with more teeth. New grass appears everywhere with the persistence of good news, sprouting from every available surface until the entire savanna looks like someone has reupholstered the world in various shades of green. It's like Christmas, if Christmas could potentially give you indigestion, which, given your recent experiences with unfamiliar vegetation, seems entirely possible. The abundance creates its own challenges. With so much new growth available, you face the pleasant problem of choice overload. Which grass to eat first? Which tender shoots deserve priority? Which of the countless new options might be the most delicious? It's the opposite of the dry season scarcity, but somehow equally overwhelming. You approach the new vegetation with the caution of someone who's learned that good things can have complicated side effects. The fresh grass tastes better than anything you remember eating, but you consume it slowly, mindful that your digestive system has adapted to dry season fare and might need time to adjust to this sudden abundance. The rain brings mud, which turns out to be both a blessing and a curse that sticks to everything you own. which is primarily your legs and the bottom portions of your body. Walking becomes an exercise in managing increasingly heavy hooves that collect soil like enthusiastic tourists collecting souvenirs. You learn that mud has different consistencies depending on the ratio of water to dirt, ranging from slightly sticky through seriously inconvenient to essentially quicksand that makes walking feel like performance art. You develop a mud walking technique that involves lifting your feet higher than necessary and placing them more carefully than you'd prefer. The birth boom arrives with the timing of a perfectly planned surprise party. Suddenly everyone's having babies, and they're all terrible at walking, which adds a new layer of complexity to herd dynamics and movement patterns. The adults had apparently been waiting for the rains to provide optimal conditions for raising offspring, demonstrating a level of family planning that impresses you with its thoroughness. The new babies stumble around on legs that make your own coordination look sophisticated by comparison. They approach the world with the confident incompetence of creatures who haven't yet learned that existing is complicated. You watch them with the superior attitude of someone who's already mastered the basics of standing upright and eating without falling over. Your role in the herd shifts slightly, as you find yourself no longer the youngest and most helpless member of the community. You're still far from being an adult, but you're no longer actively terrible at basic survival, which represents significant progress in the Antelope Personal Development Program. The wet season brings challenges you hadn't anticipated during the months when you dreamed of nothing but rain. Predators are more active, energized by the abundance and the increased number of potential meals wandering around on uncertain legs. The improved visibility works both ways. You can see farther, but so can everything that might want to eat you. Navigation becomes more complex, as familiar landmarks disappear behind curtains of new growth. Paths that had been clear during the dry season become overgrown with vegetation that seems determined to rearrange the landscape according to its own botanical preferences. You learn to navigate by different markers, adapting your mental map to accommodate the new green reality. The rains bring renewal, abundance, and the kind of problems that are much better to have than the problems of drought and scarcity. You embrace the wet season with gratitude tempered by the practical awareness that every solution creates new challenges, and every blessing comes with its own instruction manual that nobody bothers to read in advance. You've reached peak Antelope, that magical sweet spot where your body finally understands what it's supposed to be doing and agrees to cooperate most of the time. You're fast, graceful, and only occasionally confused by basic concepts like, which direction is water, or why did I just run into that tree? It's taken you several years to achieve this level of competence, but here you are, a fully functional member of the savanna's ecosystem, capable of surviving for hours at a time without adult supervision. Your transformation from the wobbly-legged creature who once ate more dirt than grass is so complete that sometimes you surprise yourself. You can navigate through tall grass without getting lost, drink water without nearly drowning, and run away from predators while maintaining something that resembles dignity. These might seem like basic skills, but in the antelope world, basic skills executed competently represent the difference between being a successful adult and becoming someone else's protein source. The coordination that once eluded you, like a particularly difficult math problem, has finally clicked into place. Your legs work together now as a cohesive unit rather than four independent contractors who couldn't agree on a timeline. You can change direction mid-sprint without falling over, leap over obstacles without calculating the physics first, and even perform the occasionally impressive maneuver that makes younger antelopes look at you with something approaching respect. Your movements have developed their own distinctive style, part instinct, part learned behavior, and part improvisation based on years of practical experience in not dying. You don't run like the textbook antelope. You run like yourself, with the particular quirks and adaptations that have kept you alive through various challenging circumstances. It's not always pretty, but it's effective, and in the survival business, effectiveness trumps aesthetics every time. Your horns are now respectable, having graduated from their earlier status as adorable bumps to become genuine weapons that command attention and occasionally respect. They're sharp enough to make a point, literally and figuratively, extending from your skull with the authority of someone who's earned the right to have dangerous protrusions attached to their head. The horns have grown with the slow patience of geological processes, adding length and girth year by year until they've become a defining feature of your personal brand. They're not the largest horns in the savanna, but they're undeniably yours, shaped by genetics, nutrition, and the particular stresses of your individual survival story. They curve just so, with subtle asymmetries that tell the story of every fight, every close call, Every moment when having horns made the difference between walking away and not walking anywhere ever again. You've learned to use your horns as tools as well as weapons. They're excellent for scratching those hard-to-reach itches, moving obstacles out of your path, and communicating your intentions to other antelopes without having to resort to actual conversation. The weight of them has become so familiar that you sometimes forget they're there until you try to fit through a space designed for smaller-headed creatures and receive a pointed reminder about your new dimensions. The respect your horns command varies depending on your audience. Other males your age regard them with the careful attention of people evaluating potential competition. Older males dismiss them with the casual superiority of individuals who've been growing impressive horns since before you figured out how to eat grass properly. Females assess them with the practical interest of people determining whether you might be worth their time for reproductive purposes. Your horns serve as a visual resume of your survival credentials. They announce to the world that you've lived long enough to grow substantial protrusions from your head, which, in the antelope community, suggests a certain level of competence at the fundamental life skills of eating, drinking, and not being eaten. They're an advertisement for your genetic fitness and your practical ability to navigate the challenges of savanna existence. Stamina development has transformed you from someone who could run fast for short distances into someone who can run reasonably fast for impressive distances while maintaining a sense of dignity and purpose. This improvement didn't happen overnight. It's the result of years of practical training in the form of frequent life-threatening situations that required sustained physical effort. Your cardiovascular system has adapted to the demands of an existence that involves regular sprinting, extended walking, and the occasional need to maintain emergency speed for longer than seems physically possible. Your heart pumps with the efficient rhythm of an engine that's been fine-tuned through extensive real-world testing. Your lungs process air with the expertise of someone who's learned that oxygen is not optional during high-stress situations. The stamina serves you well during the long migrations that mark the changing seasons. Where once you would tire after a few hours of steady travel, now you can maintain a sustainable pace from dawn to dusk, covering distances that would have seemed impossible during your awkward youth. You've learned to pace yourself, to read the signs of fatigue before they become critical, and to find that sustainable rhythm that allows you to keep moving, when movement is the difference between finding resources and not finding resources. Your endurance extends beyond just physical movement. You can now graze for extended periods without losing focus, maintaining the alert awareness necessary to detect threats while still getting the nutrition you need to fuel your increasingly efficient body. You can stand watch during the night hours, contributing to the herd's collective security without falling asleep at your post. You can endure the stress of prolonged drought or extended wet seasons without the psychological exhaustion that once made survival feel like an impossible task. The confidence that comes with survival permeates every aspect of your existence. You've made it this far, and while luck certainly played a role, the fact that you're still breathing suggests that you possess some combination of skills, instincts, and decision-making ability that's keeping you on the right side of the food chain. This confidence isn't arrogance. The savannah has a way of humbling anyone who gets too comfortable, but it's a quiet assurance that you know what you're doing, at least most of the time. This confidence affects how you move through the world. You carry yourself with the posture of someone who belongs in their environment, who understands the rules of the game and plays it competently. Other animals respond to this confidence, reading your body language as that of a creature who's comfortable in their own skin and unlikely to do anything unpredictably stupid that might endanger everyone around them. Your decision-making has improved dramatically from the days when every choice felt like a potentially fatal mistake. You can now assess situations quickly and accurately, weighing risks against benefits with the practiced ease of someone who's made these calculations thousands of times before. You know when to run and when to stand your ground, when to investigate a strange sound and when to assume it's nothing worth investigating closely. The survival confidence extends to your social interactions as well. You no longer approach other antelopes with the desperate neediness of someone who's not sure they deserve to exist. You engage with your peers as an equal, someone who's earned their place in the community through demonstrated competence rather than just biological accident. You contribute to group decisions based on your own experience and observations, rather than simply following whoever seems to know what they're doing. Your awareness of your own capabilities has become finely calibrated through experience. You know exactly how fast you can run for how long, how much you can eat before you need to rest, how far you can travel in a day without compromising your ability to respond to emergencies. This self-knowledge allows you to operate at optimal efficiency, pushing yourself when circumstances require it, while avoiding the kind of overexertion that leaves you vulnerable when threats materialize. The confidence isn't universal, you're still learning, still discovering new aspects of survival that you hadn't considered before. But you approach these learning opportunities with the steady assurance of someone who's successfully navigated the transition from helpless youth to competent adult. You've proven to yourself that you can adapt, learn, and survive, and that knowledge provides a foundation of confidence that supports everything else you do. Leaving the natal herd represents one of those major life transitions that everyone talks about, but nobody adequately prepares you for. Like moving out of your parents' house, but with more grass and significantly higher stakes. The decision doesn't happen suddenly. It builds over time like pressure in a storm system, influenced by hormones, social dynamics, and the gradual realization that you've outgrown the protection and limitations of your childhood community. The process begins with increasing restlessness, a feeling that the familiar patterns of herd life no longer fit quite right. You find yourself wandering to the edges of the group during grazing sessions, not because you're trying to leave, but because the center feels somehow confining. You catch yourself looking toward distant horizons with curiosity rather than fear, wondering what lies beyond the boundaries of your known world. The other young males in your age cohort are experiencing similar stirrings, creating a social dynamic that resembles a graduation class where everyone's ready to move on, but nobody wants to be the first to actually leave. You engage in increasingly complex territorial behaviors within the herd, establishing dominance hierarchies and resource claims that serve as practice for the real independence that's coming. The actual departure happens with less ceremony than you'd expected. One morning, after a particularly tense interaction with an older male who's made it clear that your presence is no longer welcome, you simply walk away from the group. No dramatic farewell speeches, no elaborate rituals of separation. You just pick a direction that feels right and start walking, carrying nothing but your accumulated knowledge and the growing certainty that it's time to find your own place in the world. The first few hours of independence feel simultaneously liberating and terrifying. For the first time in your life, you're making decisions based entirely on your own judgment, without the security of group consensus or the guidance of older, more experienced individuals. Every choice which direction to walk, where to stop and graze, how to respond to distant sounds, becomes a test of your ability to survive as an individual rather than as part of a collective. The silence takes some getting used to. Without the constant background noise of herd conversation, the gentle murmurs of social interaction, the occasional disputes over grazing spots, the rhythmic sounds of communal chewing, the world seems unnaturally quiet. You become hyper-aware of every sound you make, conscious that you're no longer camouflaged by the general acoustic chaos of group living. Finding your place becomes an exercise in real estate evaluation under pressure, as you search for a patch of savanna that meets your specific requirements for survival while not being actively hostile to your continued existence. The perfect territory would offer reliable water sources, diverse and nutritious vegetation, adequate shelter options, escape routes for emergency situations, and a comfortable distance from established territories claimed by individuals who might object to your presence. Reality, of course, offers nothing approaching perfection. The available territories tend to be available for reasons that become apparent once you've committed to staying there. The spot with excellent grass might be lacking in water access. The area with reliable water sources might be too exposed to predator activity. The location with good shelter options might be too close to the territory of an established male who regards you as either competition or a target of opportunity. You learn to evaluate territory through systematic exploration, spending days walking boundaries and testing resources before making any commitment to residence. You develop criteria for assessing the viability of potential homes. Water sources should be accessible year-round, not just during favorable seasons. Grazing areas should offer variety in both plant species and seasonal availability. The terrain should provide multiple escape routes rather than boxing you into vulnerable positions. The process of claiming territory involves a complex negotiation with the existing ecosystem, including both the physical environment and the social network of creatures who already call the area home. You must establish your presence gradually, making it clear that you intend to stay without triggering aggressive responses from neighbors who might interpret your arrival as a threat to their own security. Territorial boundaries, you discover, are more fluid and complex than the simple lines drawn on human maps. They shift based on seasonal resource availability, the presence or absence of predators, weather patterns, and the constantly evolving social dynamics of the local antelope community. Your territory expands during abundant times and contracts during scarcity, like a breathing organism that adapts to changing conditions. Learning to be alone proves surprisingly difficult when you've spent your entire life surrounded by familiar bodies and voices. The absence of constant social interaction creates a psychological space that you're not sure how to fill. You find yourself talking to yourself more often, narrating your activities and decisions as if there was someone there to listen, maintaining the social connections that have become habitual through years of community living. The solitude forces you to develop a different relationship with your environment. Without the distraction of social dynamics, you become more attuned to the subtle patterns of weather, the behavior of other species, the seasonal rhythms that govern resource availability. You learn to read the landscape with the attention of someone whose survival depends on understanding every detail of their surroundings. Loneliness becomes a physical sensation, like hunger, but located in your chest rather than your stomach. You miss the comfort of sleeping surrounded by other warm bodies, the security of shared vigilance during dangerous hours, the simple pleasure of companionship during routine activities like grazing and traveling. You learn to manage this loneliness through routine, activity, and the gradual development of relationships with the non-antelope residents of your territory. The responsibility of self-preservation settles on your shoulders with the weight of someone handing you the keys to expensive equipment and walking away without leaving an instruction manual. Suddenly, every decision carries the full weight of its consequences. There's no one else to catch your mistakes, no backup systems to compensate for errors in judgment, no group intelligence to rely on when your individual knowledge proves insufficient. You develop new habits of vigilance, scanning your environment with the systematic attention of someone who understands that threats can materialize from any direction at any time. Your eating patterns change. You graze in shorter sessions with more frequent breaks to assess your surroundings, never allowing yourself to become so focused on food that you lose awareness of potential dangers. Risk assessment becomes a constant background process, like mental software running continuously to evaluate the safety of every situation. You learn to trust your instincts while also questioning them, developing the balanced approach to danger that keeps you alert without making you paranoid. You practice emergency responses during quiet moments, rehearsing escape routes and defensive strategies so they'll be available when needed. Your relationship with time changes as well. Without the structured rhythm of herd activities, you must create your own schedule based on optimal timing for different survival activities. You learn when to graze for maximum nutrition and minimum exposure, when to travel for safety and efficiency, when to rest without compromising your security. The independence forces you to become self-reliant in ways that extend beyond basic survival skills. You must maintain your own motivation and morale during difficult periods, finding sources of satisfaction and purpose that don't depend on social validation or group achievement. You learn to celebrate small victories, successful days without dangerous encounters, discovery of new food sources, improvements in your territorial security that might have gone unnoticed in the context of group living. Emergency planning becomes a crucial skill when you're your own first responder. You identify multiple water sources in case your primary source becomes unavailable. You map escape routes from different areas of your territory, including backup options in case your preferred routes are blocked. You develop contingency plans for various scenarios: extended drought, predator pressure, injury, illness, territorial disputes with neighbors. The territory you eventually establish represents a compromise between your ideal requirements and the realities of what's available in your chosen ecosystem. It's not perfect, but it's yours. Claimed through effort and maintained through constant attention to the details that make the difference between thriving and merely surviving. You know every plant, every rock, every subtle change in elevation that might provide advantage in different circumstances. Your territorial knowledge becomes encyclopedic over time. You understand the seasonal patterns of plant growth, knowing which areas will provide the best grazing at different times of year. You've mapped the movements of other species, understanding how their presence affects your own safety and resource access. You've learned to read weather patterns through their local effects, recognizing the signs that predict changes in your territorial conditions. The social aspects of territorial living prove more complex than simple isolation. You develop relationships with your neighbors, other antelopes who've established territories adjacent to yours. These relationships involve careful negotiations about boundary respect, resource sharing during emergencies, and mutual assistance when threats exceed individual capacity to respond. Communication with territorial neighbors requires a sophisticated understanding of body language, vocalizations, and behavioral signals that convey intentions without triggering defensive responses. You learn to approach boundaries with the appropriate combination of confidence and respect, making it clear that you're not seeking conflict, while also demonstrating that you're prepared to defend your interests if necessary. The arrival of hormones transforms your previously straightforward existence into something resembling a soap opera written by someone with a peculiar sense of humor and a limited understanding of rational behavior. Suddenly, everything in your environment becomes either a potential mate or competition, with very little middle ground for the comfortable neutrality that once characterized your relationships with other antelopes. Your body begins producing chemical signals that you didn't know existed, flooding your system with urges and impulses that feel simultaneously foreign and fundamentally important. These hormones don't announce themselves politely or arrive with user manuals explaining how to manage their effects. They simply take up residence in your bloodstream and start influencing every decision you make, often in ways that seem designed to complicate your previously manageable life. The hormonal changes affect your behavior in ways that would be embarrassing if you retained enough rational thinking to feel embarrassed. You find yourself engaging in elaborate displays of physical prowess for no apparent reason, leaping over obstacles that could easily be walked around, running at top speed when casual movement would be more efficient, and generally showing off for an audience that may or may not be paying attention. Your territorial instincts, previously focused on practical concerns like resource security and predator avoidance, expand to include abstract concepts like personal honor and genetic legacy. You begin patrolling your boundaries with the intensity of someone guarding state secrets, responding to minor territorial incursions with reactions that seem disproportionate to the actual threat level involved. The scent-marking behaviors that emerge during mating season transform you into a living advertising campaign for your genetic credentials. You leave chemical messages throughout your territory with the frequency of someone who's never heard of subtlety, announcing your presence, your health status, your territorial claims, and your availability for reproductive collaboration to anyone with the appropriate sensory equipment to decode these signals. Courtship rituals develop their own complex choreography that resembles dancing, but with more headbutting and significantly higher stakes than most forms of entertainment. These rituals serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate your physical fitness, your ability to learn and perform complex behavioral sequences, your commitment to the reproductive process, and your capacity to participate in the elaborate social negotiations that antelope romance apparently requires. The display behaviors that characterize courtship involve a combination of athletic performance and interpretive dance that would be impressive if it weren't so exhausting to maintain. You learn to prance with dignity, which proves more challenging than it sounds when you're simultaneously trying to appear strong, graceful, and romantically appealing while maintaining awareness of your surroundings for potential threats. The vocalizations that accompany courtship add another layer of complexity to the mating season performance. You develop a repertoire of calls that convey different aspects of your romantic intentions, from the gentle murmurs that suggest casual interest to the more elaborate songs that announce serious commitment to the courtship process. Learning to modulate these vocalizations for maximum effect requires practice and timing that you're still working to master. Competition with other males introduces a social dynamic that transforms previously peaceful interactions into complex negotiations, involving horn length, general impressiveness, and the kind of psychological warfare that would make political strategists proud. The competition isn't always directly aggressive. Much of it involves subtle displays designed to demonstrate superiority without necessarily triggering actual physical confrontation. The horn measuring contests that characterize male competition involve both literal assessment of antler dimensions and metaphorical comparisons of overall genetic fitness. You find yourself engaging in elaborate displays of your horns, positioning them at angles designed to maximize their apparent size and sharpness, while simultaneously evaluating the horn quality of your competitors with the critical eye of someone shopping for expensive merchandise. Physical confrontations, when they occur, follow protocols that seem designed to minimize serious injury while still establishing clear hierarchical relationships. The head-butting contests that resolve territorial disputes operate according to rules that everyone understands but nobody explicitly discusses, involving careful positioning, strategic timing, and the kind of mutual respect that prevents disagreements from escalating into genuinely dangerous situations. The psychological aspects of male competition prove as important as the physical elements. You learn to project confidence even when you're not feeling particularly confident, to maintain composure under pressure, and to read the behavioral signals that indicate when a competitor is likely to escalate a confrontation beyond the level of symbolic display into actual physical conflict. Territorial challenges during mating season become more frequent and intense, as males seek to expand their holdings to include more attractive resources that might appeal to potential mates. Your previously stable territorial boundaries become fluid and contentious, requiring constant vigilance and frequent renegotiation as the social dynamics of the local antelope community shift in response to reproductive pressures. The complex politics of antelope romance operate according to social rules that seem surprisingly bureaucratic for creatures who spend most of their time eating grass. The courtship process involves elaborate sequences of approach and retreat, invitation and evaluation that must be performed in the correct order, with appropriate timing or risk being dismissed as socially incompetent or reproductively unworthy. Female antelopes, you discover, approach mating decisions with the systematic evaluation of people making major purchases. They assess not just your immediate physical attractiveness, but your territorial holdings, your demonstrated survival skills, your genetic credentials, as evidenced by your horn development and overall health, and your capacity to contribute to successful offspring production and rearing. The evaluation process involves extended observation periods, during which potential mates assess your behavior under various circumstances. They watch how you respond to threats, how you manage your territorial responsibilities, how you interact with other males, and how you handle the stress of courtship itself. This evaluation can extend over days or weeks, creating a prolonged period of behavioral audition that tests your ability to maintain consistent performance under pressure. Communication during courtship requires a sophisticated understanding of body language that goes far beyond the basic survival signals you've already mastered. You learn to convey interest without appearing desperate, confidence without seeming arrogant, and commitment without suggesting that you're incapable of independent decision-making. These nuanced communications require practice and cultural knowledge that you're still acquiring through trial and error. The seasonal timing of courtship activities adds urgency to the entire process. The window of reproductive opportunity is limited by biological cycles and environmental conditions, creating time pressure that affects every aspect of courtship behavior. You must balance the need for thorough evaluation and careful decision-making with the reality that waiting too long might mean missing the opportunity entirely. Success in courtship, when it occurs, brings its own set of challenges and responsibilities. Successful pair bonding requires ongoing negotiation about territorial boundaries, resource sharing, and the division of responsibilities for offspring protection and rearing. The relationship dynamics that develop during courtship must transition into practical partnerships capable of managing the complex logistics of reproduction and child rearing in a dangerous environment. The courtship success creates temporary alliances that affect your relationships with other males in the area. Former competitors may become potential allies in collective defense of territorial holdings, while new males entering the area may represent fresh challenges to your newly established reproductive partnerships. Managing these shifting alliances requires diplomatic skills that you're developing through practical experience. Failure in courtship, which happens more often than success, requires its own set of coping strategies. Rejection must be processed without allowing it to undermine your confidence for future courtship attempts. Failed courtship efforts provide learning opportunities about what potential mates are seeking and how to improve your presentation for subsequent attempts. The emotional management required during mating season proves as challenging as the physical and social demands. You must maintain motivation and optimism through repeated rejections while avoiding the kind of desperation that makes you less attractive to potential mates. You learn to balance persistence with respect for others' decisions, continuing to pursue courtship opportunities without becoming a nuisance to the local antelope community. Sometimes you win the complex game of antelope romance, successfully navigating the elaborate social protocols and biological imperatives to establish reproductive partnerships that provide both immediate satisfaction and long-term genetic continuation. These victories validate your survival skills and social competence while creating new responsibilities for the protection and support of offspring. Sometimes you eat grass alone, contemplating the mysteries of attraction and compatibility while maintaining your territorial holdings and preparing for future courtship opportunities. These periods of solitary reflection provide time to develop your individual identity and survival capabilities while observing the courtship successes and failures of others for insights that might improve your own future performance. The cycles of mating season, success, and failure create rhythms that structure your adult life around reproductive opportunities and the periods of preparation and recovery that surround them. You learn to view each mating season as both an endpoint and a beginning, celebrating achievements while already beginning preparations for future opportunities to demonstrate your worth as a genetic contributor to the next generation of antelopes. You've now survived multiple dry seasons with the expertise of someone who's earned an advanced degree in desert survival through practical application rather than theoretical study. Each dry season has taught you something new about resource management, psychological endurance, and the art of maintaining hope when the landscape offers little evidence that hope is justified. You've become the kind of creature that younger antelopes look to for guidance when the grass turns brown and the waterholes begin their annual disappearing act. Your dry season expertise encompasses both the practical skills of resource location and the psychological techniques necessary to maintain morale during months of scarcity and increasing desperation. You know where to find the deepest water sources that persist longest into the drought, which plants maintain nutritional value even when they appear completely desiccated, and how to read the subtle signs that predict when the dry season is approaching its end. The water management skills you've developed would impress professional hydrologists. If professional hydrologists had to locate their water sources by smell and experience rather than sophisticated equipment, you've mapped every reliable water source within a day's journey of your territory, including backup sources that only become accessible when primary sources fail, and emergency sources that require considerable effort to reach but provide security when all else fails. Your knowledge of water extends beyond simple location to include quality assessment, seasonal reliability patterns, and the social dynamics that govern access to shared resources during periods of scarcity. You understand which water sources are likely to be contested by other species, which ones require careful timing to access safely, and which ones provide not just water, but the mineral supplements that become crucial during extended drought periods. The plant knowledge you've accumulated through years of practical botanical study would qualify you for advanced degrees in rangeland ecology if such degrees were awarded based on survival success rather than academic achievement. You can identify dozens of plant species by taste, smell, and appearance, understanding their nutritional content, seasonal availability, and the specific growing conditions that indicate their presence in unfamiliar territories. Your grazing strategies have evolved from simple grass consumption to sophisticated nutritional management that takes into account seasonal variations in plant quality, the need to maintain energy reserves for emergency situations, and the importance of digestive health during periods when food choices become limited. You've learned to pace your consumption to maintain optimal nutrition while avoiding the digestive problems that can arise from sudden changes in diet quality or availability. Reading weather patterns has become second nature, a skill that operates at the intersection of meteorology and mysticism. You can predict rain almost as well as a meteorologist, which is to say that you're right, significantly more often than random chance would suggest, though still wrong often enough to maintain appropriate humility about your forecasting abilities. Your weather prediction methods combine traditional atmospheric observation with the kind of biological indicators that only become apparent through years of careful attention to the relationship between environmental conditions and natural phenomena. You read the behavior of birds, the movement patterns of insects, the subtle changes in plant posture that indicate shifting humidity and barometric pressure. The cloud interpretation skills you've developed allow you to distinguish between the various types of atmospheric moisture that might or might not produce actual precipitation. You understand the difference between clouds that are merely decorative and clouds that carry genuine potential for rain, though you've also learned that this distinction can change rapidly based on atmospheric conditions that remain largely mysterious, even to experienced weather observers. Your sensitivity to atmospheric pressure changes has become so refined that you can often predict weather shifts, hours, or even days before they become obvious to less experienced observers. Your joints ache before storms with the reliability of a living barometer, and you've learned to trust these physical signals even when the sky appears deceptively clear. Migration timing requires the kind of wisdom that comes from understanding the complex interactions between multiple environmental factors, seasonal patterns, and the biological imperatives that drive large-scale movement across the landscape. Knowing when to move and when to stay represents one of the most crucial survival skills in your repertoire, requiring decisions that affect not just your immediate comfort but your long-term survival prospects. The migration decisions you make must balance the risks of staying in deteriorating conditions against the dangers of traveling through unfamiliar territory toward resources that may or may not be available when you arrive. These decisions require processing information about current conditions, historical patterns, and the behavior of other species that might indicate environmental changes happening beyond your immediate sensory range. Your understanding of migration patterns has expanded from simple seasonal movement to include emergency migrations triggered by drought, predator pressure, or other environmental disasters that require rapid adaptation to changing circumstances. You've learned to read the subtle signs that indicate when emergency migration might become necessary, and you've developed contingency plans for various scenarios that might require abandoning established territories. The timing of migration movements requires understanding not just when to leave, but when to arrive. Moving too early wastes energy and exposes you to unnecessary risks, while moving too late means competing for resources with large numbers of other animals who've made similar decisions. Finding the optimal timing requires balancing multiple factors that are constantly changing based on environmental conditions. Resource management has evolved from simple consumption patterns to sophisticated strategies that account for seasonal availability, storage possibilities, and the need to maintain reserves for emergency situations. Understanding that not all grass is created equal represents just the beginning of a complex knowledge system that encompasses nutrition, timing, and the strategic thinking necessary to maintain health during periods of scarcity. Your grazing strategies now include detailed knowledge of which plants provide specific nutrients, which combinations of vegetation create balanced nutrition, and how to maintain optimal health during periods when preferred food sources become unavailable. You've learned to identify and utilize plants that most antelopes ignore, expanding your nutritional options during difficult periods. The territorial resource management you practice involves careful attention to the carrying capacity of your land, understanding how many animals can be supported by available vegetation without depleting resources beyond their capacity for natural regeneration. You've learned to rotate your grazing areas to prevent overuse, allowing previously grazed areas to recover while utilizing alternative resources. Your understanding of seasonal resource cycles allows you to plan consumption patterns that take advantage of periods of abundance while preparing for predictable periods of scarcity. You know when to graze heavily to build energy reserves, and when to reduce consumption to extend the availability of limited resources. The social aspects of resource management have become increasingly important as you've established relationships with other antelopes who share your general territory. You've learned to participate in informal resource sharing agreements that provide mutual support during emergency situations while maintaining respect for territorial boundaries during normal times. Your knowledge of alternative food sources extends beyond standard grazing to include emergency options that become crucial during severe resource shortages. You know which bark can be consumed safely when grass becomes unavailable, which roots provide emergency nutrition during extreme drought, and which alternative food sources can sustain life when conventional resources fail completely. The psychological strategies you've developed for managing seasonal stress and maintaining motivation during difficult periods represent perhaps your most important survival skills. You've learned to maintain hope during seemingly hopeless circumstances, to find satisfaction in small improvements when major changes seem impossible, and to maintain the long-term perspective necessary to survive temporary hardships. Your seasonal mastery represents the culmination of years of practical education in the realities of savanna existence. You've learned not just to survive the changing seasons, but to thrive within their constraints, using your understanding of natural patterns to anticipate challenges and opportunities that allow you to maintain not just existence, but a quality of life that makes existence worthwhile. Other antelopes now follow your lead with the kind of trust usually reserved for people who've proven themselves through repeated competence rather than inherited authority. This transition from follower to leader happened so gradually that you barely noticed it occurring, like gaining weight or developing wisdom. One day you looked around and realized that younger antelopes were watching your movements, copying your decisions, and generally treating you like someone who knows what they're doing. The responsibility settles on your shoulders with the weight of wet grass, which is to say it's heavier than you expected and has a tendency to make everything else more difficult. Being responsible for your own survival was challenging enough when the consequences of poor decisions affected only you. Now your choices ripple outward through a network of creatures who've decided that your judgment is worth trusting, which would be flattering if it weren't so terrifying. You discover that leadership in the antelope world operates less like a formal hierarchy and more like a loose confederation of individuals who've agreed to let someone else make the hard decisions in exchange for not having to think too carefully about survival logistics. The other antelopes don't follow you because you demanded their allegiance or inherited some divine right to leadership. They follow you because you've demonstrated consistent competence at the fundamental challenge of staying alive. The leadership role comes with an unspoken job description that includes responsibilities you never explicitly agreed to accept. You're expected to make decisions about group movement, evaluate potential threats, assess resource quality, and generally serve as the primary risk management system for a collection of individuals who'd rather focus on eating grass than constantly worrying about death. It's like being appointed chief executive officer of a company whose only product is collective survival. Your followers include a mix of younger antelopes who lack your experience, older antelopes who've decided to delegate decision-making to someone with more energy, and peers who recognize your superior skill at reading environmental conditions and making strategic choices under pressure. This diverse constituency requires different types of leadership: teaching for the inexperienced, consultation for the veterans, collaboration for the equals. The teaching aspect of leadership proves particularly challenging because antelope education operates primarily through demonstration rather than verbal instruction. You can't simply explain why certain decisions are correct. You must make choices that prove their wisdom through successful outcomes, which means your educational methods are tested continuously by circumstances that could kill your students if you get the lessons wrong. Decision-making skills become your most valuable asset. As a leader, particularly the ability to choose between mediocre grazing spots with confidence and speed that suggests you know what you're doing, even when you're not entirely certain. The reality of leadership is that most decisions must be made based on incomplete information under time pressure, with consequences that affect multiple lives rather than just your own. The grazing spot decisions that once required only personal preference now involve complex calculations about group size, energy requirements, safety considerations, and resource conservation. A location that might be perfect for individual grazing could be inadequate for group needs, while areas that could support group grazing might expose everyone to predator risks that wouldn't affect a solitary individual. Your decision-making process has evolved to include systematic risk assessment that weighs multiple factors simultaneously. You consider not just the immediate quality of resources, but their sustainability under group use, the security of the location during vulnerable activities like drinking and resting, the availability of escape routes if threats materialize, and the strategic positioning relative to other essential resources. The speed of decision-making becomes crucial when leading groups, because delays in choice can be more dangerous than imperfect choices made quickly. A mediocre grazing spot selected immediately is often superior to an optimal grazing spot chosen after extended deliberation that leaves the group exposed during the evaluation process. You learn to make rapid assessments that balance thoroughness with efficiency. Your followers expect decisions to be made with apparent confidence, even when you're internally uncertain about the best course of action. This requires developing a leadership persona that projects assurance while maintaining the internal flexibility necessary to adapt when circumstances change or new information becomes available. You learn to appear decisive while remaining open to course corrections. Reading the landscape becomes an exercise in constant environmental analysis that operates at multiple levels of awareness simultaneously. Every shadow could hide danger, every sound matters, and every subtle change in atmospheric conditions might signal shifts that affect group safety and resource availability. Your perception expands from personal survival awareness to encompass the security needs of multiple individuals with varying capabilities and vulnerability levels. The visual scanning patterns you've developed as a leader cover wider areas with greater systematic thoroughness than the more focused attention patterns that sufficed for individual survival. You monitor not just immediate threats and opportunities, but the broader environmental context that might affect group movement, resource availability, and security over extended time periods. Sound interpretation becomes particularly crucial when leading groups, because audio information often provides the earliest warning of threats or opportunities that haven't yet become visible. You learn to distinguish between the normal sounds of a healthy ecosystem and the subtle audio signatures that indicate predator presence, resource availability, or environmental changes that might affect group safety. The burden of experience weighs on your leadership decisions with the accumulated knowledge of exactly how many things can go wrong and precisely how quickly good situations can deteriorate into life-threatening emergencies. This knowledge provides valuable risk assessment capabilities, but it also creates psychological pressure that can make decision-making more difficult rather than easier. Your experience catalog includes detailed memories of every survival challenge you've encountered, every close call you've survived, every mistake you've made that could have been fatal under slightly different circumstances. This knowledge base allows you to recognize dangerous patterns before they fully develop, but it also makes you acutely aware of the numerous ways that leadership decisions can result in catastrophic outcomes. The psychological weight of leadership experience includes not just awareness of potential dangers, but understanding of the consequences of failed leadership for the individuals who've chosen to trust your judgment. The knowledge that poor decisions could result in injury or death for your followers adds emotional complexity to every choice you make as a leader. You develop strategies for managing the psychological burden of leadership responsibility, including compartmentalization techniques that allow you to maintain effective decision-making capability without becoming paralyzed by awareness of potential negative outcomes. You learn to acknowledge risks without becoming obsessed with them, maintaining the balanced perspective necessary for effective leadership under pressure. The experience burden also includes positive knowledge that enhances your leadership effectiveness. Understanding of which strategies have proven successful in past situations, recognition of environmental patterns that predict resource availability, and familiarity with the behavioral characteristics of other species that share your ecosystem. This positive experience provides the foundation for confident decision-making that benefits your followers. Your leadership style develops its own distinctive characteristics based on your personality, your experience base, and the specific needs of your follower group. You learn to balance assertiveness with collaboration, confidence with flexibility, and authority with accessibility in ways that maximize group survival while maintaining social cohesion. The relationship dynamics of leadership require ongoing attention to the needs and preferences of your followers, while maintaining the authority necessary to make difficult decisions when consensus isn't possible or time doesn't permit extensive consultation. You develop skills in group psychology that help you maintain follower loyalty and cooperation, even when your decisions aren't universally popular. Communication as a leader involves not just conveying decisions, but explaining the reasoning behind choices in ways that help your followers understand and support your leadership, even when they might disagree with specific decisions. You learn to use body language, vocalizations, and behavioral demonstrations to communicate complex information about threats, opportunities, and strategic thinking. Claiming and defending prime real estate has transformed you into something resembling a landlord, but grumpier and with significantly more personal investment in property management outcomes. The territory you've established represents years of strategic thinking, careful evaluation, and persistent effort to create a space that meets your complex requirements for survival, comfort, and reproductive success. Unlike human real estate transactions, your property acquisition involved no paperwork, no financial institutions, and no legal protections, just your ability to identify valuable land and defend it against competitors who might appreciate its qualities as much as you do. The prime real estate you've claimed didn't become available through market forces or inheritance. It became yours through a combination of strategic timing, persistent effort, and the kind of negotiation skills that involve physical demonstrations of commitment rather than verbal agreements. You identified this territory during a period when its previous occupant was either absent, deceased, or sufficiently weakened to be displaced through direct confrontation. Your territory selection process involved extensive evaluation of multiple properties over considerable time periods, like house hunting but with higher stakes and more emphasis on defensibility than decorative features. You assessed each potential territory for water access, grazing quality, shelter availability, escape route options, proximity to other essential resources, and the strategic positioning that would allow you to maintain control without excessive energy expenditure. The water access evaluation required understanding not just current availability, but seasonal reliability patterns that would ensure year-round hydration, regardless of weather conditions. You identified multiple water sources within your territorial boundaries, including primary sources for daily use, backup sources for emergency situations, and seasonal sources that provide additional security during optimal conditions. Grazing quality assessment involved detailed analysis of plant species diversity, soil conditions, seasonal growth patterns, and the carrying capacity that would support your nutritional needs without depleting resources beyond their natural regeneration capabilities. You evaluated not just current grass conditions, but the long-term sustainability of the vegetation under regular use pressure. The shelter evaluation encompassed both natural protection from weather and defensive positions that could provide security during predator encounters. You identified multiple shelter options within your territory, including thick vegetation for concealment, rocky areas for protection, and elevated positions that provide advantageous visibility for threat detection and strategic positioning. Escape route planning required mapping multiple exit strategies from different areas of your territory, ensuring that you would never be trapped in a position without viable options for rapid evacuation if circumstances required immediate departure. You identified primary escape routes for different types of threats, backup routes in case primary options became blocked, and emergency routes for worst-case scenarios. The territorial boundaries you established represent compromises between your ideal property dimensions and the practical realities of what you could effectively defend against determined challenges. The boundaries follow natural landmarks when possible, streams, rock formations, distinctive vegetation patterns that provide clear demarcation, while also offering strategic advantages for defensive purposes. Boundary maintenance requires constant attention and periodic reinforcement through scent marking, behavioral displays, and direct confrontation when necessary. You patrol your territorial borders with the regularity of a security guard, making rounds, refreshing scent markers, checking for signs of unauthorized entry, and maintaining the visible presence that discourages casual encroachment. Dealing with challenges has become a regular aspect of territorial management that requires diplomatic skills, strategic thinking, and occasional willingness to engage in physical confrontation when other conflict resolution methods prove insufficient. The challengers who test your territorial control fall into several categories, each requiring different response strategies and management approaches. Younger antelopes, who think they know better, represent the most common category of territorial challenger. These individuals possess the energy and optimism of youth, but lack the experience and practical knowledge that comes from years of successful territory management. They often challenge your control based on theoretical assessments of territorial value, rather than practical understanding of the effort required to maintain control over desirable property. The young challengers typically approach territorial disputes with more enthusiasm than strategy, relying on physical capabilities rather than tactical thinking. They assume that superior speed or jumping ability will compensate for their lack of experience in territorial conflict, often underestimating the importance of psychological warfare, strategic positioning, and the home field advantages that come with intimate knowledge of specific terrain. Your response to young challengers involves a carefully calibrated combination of education and demonstration that establishes your superior competence without unnecessarily escalating conflicts beyond their educational value. You use these encounters as teaching opportunities when possible, demonstrating proper territorial protocols while establishing clear hierarchical relationships that benefit both parties. Mature challengers present more serious threats to your territorial security because they possess both the experience to mount effective campaigns and the practical knowledge to exploit weaknesses in your defensive strategies. These individuals typically challenge your territory only after careful evaluation of your capabilities and identification of specific vulnerabilities that might allow successful takeover. The conflicts with experienced challengers require your full attention and strategic capabilities because these individuals understand territorial warfare as well as you do and may possess advantages in specific areas, superior physical condition, better knowledge of local conditions, or strategic alliances that enhance their competitive position. These challenges often develop into extended campaigns rather than single confrontations. The art of the strategic retreat has become one of your most valuable territorial management skills, representing the wisdom to recognize when temporary withdrawal serves your long-term interests better than persistent defense of untenable positions. Strategic retreat requires overcoming the psychological resistance to abandoning territory you've worked to establish, while maintaining the tactical awareness necessary to recognize when retreat represents wisdom rather than weakness. Knowing when to retreat involves rapid assessment of multiple factors: the strength and determination of challengers, your own current physical condition, the strategic value of the contested territory relative to your overall holdings, the availability of alternative resources, and the likely consequences of prolonged conflict for your general territorial security. The execution of strategic retreat requires careful timing and positioning to minimize losses while preserving options for future territorial recovery when circumstances become more favorable. You learn to withdraw in ways that don't signal complete defeat, maintaining dignity and reputation while acknowledging temporary tactical disadvantage. Sometimes, the best defense is indeed a quick exit, particularly when facing multiple challengers, superior forces, or circumstances that make successful defense unlikely, regardless of your effort investment. You develop the tactical flexibility to abandon specific territorial areas when necessary, while maintaining control over core holdings that provide essential resources for survival. Maintaining boundaries involves the subtle art of aggressive grazing, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, but represents a sophisticated territorial management strategy that establishes presence and control through seemingly peaceful activities. Aggressive grazing involves systematic consumption of vegetation along territorial borders in patterns that communicate ownership while providing the nutritional benefits of normal feeding behavior. The timing of boundary grazing sends specific signals to potential challengers about your territorial vigilance and resource control. Regular grazing along borders demonstrates constant presence and attention to territorial security, while the systematic nature of the activity shows organized management rather than random resource use. Your grazing patterns along territorial boundaries serve multiple purposes. They maintain clear sight lines that enhance security monitoring. They remove vegetation that might provide concealment for approaching threats. They establish scent trails that mark territorial ownership. And they demonstrate resource control to observers who might be evaluating your territorial management competence. The psychological aspects of territorial maintenance require projecting confidence and competence, even during periods when you're dealing with internal uncertainties or external pressures that might compromise your actual control. You learn to maintain the appearance of unshakable territorial authority while adapting to changing circumstances that require flexibility in your management strategies. Your territorial establishment represents more than just resource control. It's a statement about your competence as an adult antelope, your genetic fitness for reproduction, your capacity for long-term planning and execution, and your commitment to the responsibilities of mature adulthood. The territory serves as both your home and your resume, demonstrating to potential mates and competitors alike that you possess the skills necessary for successful independent existence. If you've successfully reproduced, congratulations, you now worry about more lives than just your own, which fundamentally transforms your relationship with risk, time, and the basic calculations that govern survival decision-making. The transition from individual survival to family responsibility happens with the abrupt finality of someone flipping a switch, suddenly expanding your sphere of concern from a single set of survival requirements to a complex network of interdependent lives whose continued existence depends on your competence as a provider, protector, and educator. The reproductive success that brings offspring into your life represents both a biological victory and a practical challenge that requires developing entirely new skill sets while maintaining all the competencies that kept you alive long enough to achieve reproductive age. Your previous expertise in individual survival provides the foundation for family responsibility, but caring for offspring requires additional capabilities that you must develop quickly and implement effectively under pressure. Your mate selection, assuming you've successfully navigated the complex social and biological negotiations that lead to reproductive partnership, adds another layer of responsibility to your family management duties. Maintaining a successful pair bond requires ongoing attention to relationship dynamics, resource-sharing negotiations, territorial cooperation, and the division of labor that allows two adults to effectively manage the challenges of offspring protection and education. The courtship success that led to reproduction creates expectations for continued partnership that extend beyond the immediate breeding season into long-term collaboration on family management. Your mate expects continued demonstration of the competencies that made you attractive as a reproductive partner: territorial security, resource management, threat assessment, and the general survival expertise that suggests your genetic contribution will enhance offspring survival prospects. Communication with your mate involves complex negotiations about parental responsibilities, territorial management, resource allocation, and strategic decision-making that affects the entire family unit. These discussions require diplomatic skills that balance individual preferences with family needs, maintaining relationship harmony, while ensuring that essential survival tasks receive adequate attention from appropriate family members. Teaching the next generation involves passing on wisdom like, "Don't eat the red berries," which sounds simple, but represents just one small element of a comprehensive education system that must prepare young antelopes for independent survival. In an environment that offers numerous creative ways to die, your educational responsibilities encompass everything from basic motor skills to advanced threat assessment, covering both the practical techniques of survival and the psychological resilience necessary to maintain motivation during difficult circumstances. The curriculum you develop for offspring education must be comprehensive enough to provide genuine survival preparation, while remaining simple enough for young minds to absorb and retain under stress. You must teach not just what to do in various situations, but how to think about novel challenges that weren't specifically covered in their education but require application of general principles you've attempted to convey. Your teaching methods rely primarily on demonstration and guided practice rather than verbal instruction, which means your educational effectiveness depends on your ability to model correct behavior consistently while providing opportunities for safe learning experiences that build competence without exposing offspring to excessive danger. during their skill development period. The red berry prohibition represents a specific example of the countless safety lessons that young antelopes must master before achieving independence. You must teach them to identify not just obviously dangerous plants, but to recognize the subtle signs that distinguish safe vegetation from plants that might cause illness, digestive problems, or more serious health consequences that could compromise survival. Plant identification education requires systematic instruction in botanical risk assessment that covers not just which plants to avoid, but how to evaluate unfamiliar vegetation when venturing into new territories. Your offspring must learn to approach unknown plants with appropriate caution, testing small quantities before committing to full consumption, and recognizing the symptoms that indicate plant-related health problems. The safety education extends far beyond plant identification to include predator recognition, environmental hazard awareness, weather pattern interpretation, navigation skills, and the complex social protocols that govern interactions with other antelopes. Each subject area requires detailed instruction that builds from basic concepts to advanced applications that your offspring will need for independent survival. Predator education involves teaching your offspring to identify different types of threats, understand various hunting strategies employed by different predator species, recognize the early warning signs that suggest predator presence, and implement appropriate escape strategies based on specific threat characteristics and environmental conditions. The threat assessment training you provide must prepare your offspring to make rapid decisions about danger levels and appropriate responses without becoming so paranoid that they spend all their time worrying about threats rather than engaging in the normal activities necessary for growth and development. You must calibrate their risk awareness to be appropriately cautious without being debilitatingly fearful. Protecting offspring suddenly makes you care about things other than your own survival. Expanding your threat assessment calculations to include risks that might not affect you directly, but could harm vulnerable family members who lack your experience and defensive capabilities. This protective instinct transforms your environmental awareness from individual-focused to family-centered, making you more sensitive to subtle threats that might previously have been ignored. Your protective responsibilities require maintaining constant vigilance, not just for immediate threats, but for potential dangers that might develop over time. You must monitor the behavior of other animals in your territory, watch for signs of predator activity that might indicate increased risk levels, and track environmental changes that could affect family security. The physical protection of offspring involves positioning yourself between potential threats and vulnerable family members, using your body as a shield when necessary, and being prepared to engage in defensive combat, even when you might personally prefer flight as a survival strategy. Your willingness to fight rather than flee must overcome years of training that emphasized escape as the optimal response to danger. Emergency planning for family protection requires developing multiple contingency strategies that account for different family member capabilities and various threat scenarios. You must prepare escape plans that accommodate slower moving offspring, identify shelter options that provide security for multiple individuals, and maintain resource reserves that can support family needs during emergency situations. The communication systems you develop for family protection must be clear enough for young antelopes to understand, while being sophisticated enough to convey complex information about threat levels, appropriate responses, and strategic positioning. Your alarm calls must specify not just the presence of danger, but the type of threat and the recommended response strategy. The circle of life reveals itself with particular clarity when you realize you've become the adult you once followed blindly through landscapes that seemed impossibly complex and dangerous. The transformation from follower to leader within your own family creates moments of recognition when you observe your own offspring, displaying the same trust in your judgment that you once placed in the adults who guided your early development. Your memories of childhood dependence provide valuable perspective on your current parental responsibilities, helping you understand the psychological needs of young antelopes who must learn to trust adult judgment even when they don't understand the reasoning behind specific decisions. You remember the comfort of following confident adults and strive to provide that same security for your offspring. The wisdom transfer that characterizes successful parenting involves more than just teaching specific survival techniques. It requires conveying the general principles of good decision-making, risk assessment, and adaptive thinking that will serve your offspring throughout their lives. You must teach them not just what to do, but how to think about novel situations that require creative problem-solving. Your role model function requires maintaining consistent behavior that demonstrates the values and competencies you're attempting to instill in your offspring. Young antelopes learn as much from observing your daily behavior as from receiving explicit instruction, which means your parenting effectiveness depends partly on your ability to embody the principles you're teaching. The patience required for effective parenting tests your psychological resources in ways that individual survival never demanded. Young antelopes learn slowly, make predictable mistakes repeatedly, and require constant supervision that can be exhausting for adults who've become accustomed to the efficiency of independent operation. Your family responsibilities create competing demands on your time and energy that require careful management to ensure that all essential tasks receive adequate attention. You must balance individual survival needs with family protection duties, territorial maintenance with offspring education, and mate relationship maintenance with personal development. The emotional investment involved in family responsibility creates new vulnerabilities that didn't exist during your independent adult phase. Your concern for offspring welfare can compromise your own safety assessment, leading to decisions that prioritize family security over personal survival in ways that might not be optimal for long-term family welfare. The family management skills you develop during this phase of life prepare you for potential leadership roles within larger social groups, as the competencies required for successful parenting, education, protection, resource management, strategic planning translate directly to the requirements of community leadership. Your family success provides social credentials that enhance your status within the broader Antelope community, demonstrating your competence as a mature adult, capable of managing complex responsibilities while maintaining the individual survival skills that enabled your progression to reproductive maturity. You know every water source within a day's journey with the intimate familiarity of someone who's mapped their territory through years of systematic exploration, emergency navigation, and the kind of detailed observation that comes from understanding that water knowledge can mean the difference between thriving and dying slowly of dehydration. Your mental map of regional hydrology would impress professional surveyors if professional surveyors had to conduct their work while avoiding predators and managing the constant pressure of survival logistics. The water source catalogue you've developed through practical experience includes not just location information, but detailed knowledge of seasonal reliability patterns, quality characteristics, access challenges, and the social dynamics that govern usage rights during various environmental conditions. You understand which sources flow year-round and which depend on seasonal precipitation, which ones provide clean water suitable for regular consumption, and which should be used only during emergencies. Your knowledge extends beyond simple location data to include the subtle environmental indicators that reveal water presence before it becomes directly visible. You can detect underground water sources by reading vegetation patterns, animal behavior, soil characteristics, and atmospheric humidity variations that suggest moisture availability in areas where surface water isn't immediately apparent. The seasonal reliability assessment you've developed for each known water source takes into account not just historical patterns, but the environmental factors that influence water persistence during different climate conditions. You understand how drought affects various source types, which locations maintain flow during extended dry periods, and which sources recover most quickly when precipitation returns. Quality evaluation skills allow you to assess water safety through visual inspection, smell analysis, and understanding of the environmental factors that affect water purity. You can identify sources that might be contaminated by upstream activity, affected by mineral concentrations that could cause health problems, or compromised by algae growth or other biological factors that make consumption inadvisable. The access evaluation encompasses both the physical challenges of reaching various water sources and the security considerations that affect safe utilization. You understand which sources require exposed approaches that increase predator vulnerability, which ones can be accessed with adequate concealment, and which locations provide good escape route options if threats materialize during drinking activities. Social dynamics of water access involve understanding the informal protocols that govern resource sharing among different animal species. The territorial claims that various creatures maintain over specific water sources, and the timing patterns that minimize conflicts during high-demand periods when multiple species compete for limited resources. Your contingency planning for water access includes multiple backup sources for various scenarios, emergency reserves for drought conditions, alternative locations when primary sources become compromised or contested, and distant sources that require significant travel but provide security when local options become unavailable or unsafe. Reading animal behavior has become a sophisticated early warning system that operates through your understanding of how different species respond to environmental changes, predator presence, and resource availability. When the birds get nervous, you get nervous, because you've learned that bird behavior often provides the earliest indication of threats or opportunities that haven't yet become apparent through other sensory channels. Your interpretation of bird behavior includes understanding the different alarm calls that various species use to communicate about specific types of threats, the movement patterns that indicate normal foraging versus nervous vigilance, and the social dynamics that distinguish routine bird interactions from stress responses that suggest environmental disturbance. The bird alarm system you've learned to interpret operates like a biological radar network that extends your threat detection capabilities far beyond your individual sensory range. Different bird species respond to different types of threats with characteristic behaviors that you've learned to decode for information about predator type, proximity, movement, direction, and threat level. Your understanding of bird feeding behavior provides information about insect activity, plant phenology, and environmental conditions that affect food availability throughout the ecosystem. Changes in bird feeding patterns can indicate seasonal transitions, weather pattern shifts, or environmental disturbances that might affect resource availability for other species, including yourself. The social behavior of birds provides information about breeding seasons, territorial disputes, and migration patterns that correlate with broader environmental changes affecting the entire ecosystem. Your ability to read these social signals helps you understand seasonal transitions and resource availability patterns that influence your own survival strategies. Mammalian behavior interpretation allows you to assess the stress levels and territorial status of other herbivore species whose environmental challenges overlap with your own. The behavior of other grazing animals provides information about resource quality, predator pressure, and environmental changes that affect the broader herbivore community. Your understanding of predator behavior patterns helps you assess threat levels based on the hunting activity, territorial movements, and social dynamics of various carnivorous species that share your environment. You can distinguish between casual predator presence and active hunting behavior, understanding when predators pose immediate threats versus when they're engaged in other activities that don't create urgent danger. Weather prediction has transformed you into a living barometer whose joints ache before storms with the reliability of expensive meteorological equipment, though significantly more accurate for local conditions than distant weather stations that might not capture the microclimate variations that affect your specific territory. Your weather sensitivity operates through multiple biological systems that respond to atmospheric pressure changes, humidity variations, temperature shifts, and electromagnetic phenomena that precede various weather events. These physical responses to environmental changes provide advance warning of storm systems, precipitation events, and seasonal transitions that affect survival planning. The joint pain that precedes storms represents just one element of a comprehensive biological weather monitoring system that includes changes in energy levels, sleep patterns, appetite, and general physical comfort that correlate with various atmospheric conditions. You've learned to interpret these physical signals as reliable indicators of approaching weather changes. Your understanding of cloud formations, wind patterns, atmospheric pressure indicators, and other observable weather signs allows you to predict precipitation, timing, storm intensity, temperature changes, and seasonal transitions, with the accuracy that comes from years of practical observation, combined with biological sensitivity to atmospheric conditions. The long-range weather pattern recognition you've developed helps you anticipate seasonal transitions, drought cycles, and other extended climate phenomena that affect resource planning and survival strategy development. Your ability to recognize the early signs of seasonal change allows you to prepare for resource shifts before they become critical. Local microclimate understanding helps you predict how larger weather patterns will affect your specific territory, accounting for topographical influences, vegetation effects, and other geographical factors that create variations from regional weather patterns. You understand how your territory responds to different weather events and can plan accordingly. The comfortable routine that has emerged from years of environmental mastery represents life settling into predictable patterns of survival that allow you to maintain security and resource access with increasing efficiency and decreasing stress. Your daily, seasonal, and annual routines reflect optimized solutions to the recurring challenges of savanna existence. Your daily routine balances the various activities necessary for survival: grazing, water access, territorial maintenance, social interaction, rest, and security monitoring in patterns that maximize efficiency while minimizing risk exposure. The timing of different activities takes advantage of optimal environmental conditions while avoiding peak danger periods. The seasonal routines you've developed coordinate your activities with natural resource cycles, migration patterns, breeding seasons, and weather changes that affect survival requirements and opportunities. Your annual schedule reflects deep understanding of how environmental changes affect resource availability and survival challenges throughout the yearly cycle. Your territorial maintenance routine ensures that all aspects of your land management receive adequate attention, without requiring conscious planning for every activity. The systematic attention to boundaries, resource monitoring, habitat improvement, and security assessment has become automatic, requiring minimal mental energy while maintaining territorial integrity. The social routines that govern your interactions with mates, offspring, neighbors, and other community members reflect established protocols that maintain relationships, while efficiently managing the time and energy requirements of social participation. Your social schedule balances relationship maintenance with individual survival needs. Emergency response routines ensure that you're prepared for various crisis scenarios, without requiring extensive planning during actual emergencies. Your practiced responses to different types of threats, resource shortages, and environmental challenges allow rapid implementation of appropriate survival strategies when immediate action becomes necessary. The psychological comfort that comes from mastering your environment provides a foundation of confidence and security that enhances your effectiveness in all aspects of survival, while reducing the stress and anxiety that once characterized your daily existence. You've achieved a level of environmental integration that allows you to focus on optimization rather than basic survival. Your body starts filing complaints with the persistence of an overworked bureaucracy that's decided to document every accumulated indignity of a lifetime spent navigating the physical demands of savanna existence. These complaints arrive as a steady stream of aches, creaks, and general protests that serve as daily reminders that your biological warranty has expired, and you're now operating on borrowed time and accumulated wear patterns. Your joints now creak like old wooden floors, announcing your approach with subtle percussion. The morning routine that once involved simply standing now requires gradual component activation, allowing each joint to remember its function. Your spine has developed its own personality, expressing opinions about weather changes through a complex vocabulary of clicks and pops. Speed decreases with gradual inevitability. You're now more dignified trot than graceful sprint, which requires more strategic thinking and earlier threat detection. The realization that you can no longer simply outrun problems demands fundamental adjustments to survival strategies. Your battle-scarred horns command respect, bearing physical evidence of every territorial dispute and defensive encounter. Each nick and groove tells a story that other antelopes can read like a resume written in keratin. Young antelopes regard them with awe, while peers evaluate them with professional interest. The wisdom of knowing your limits represents the most valuable knowledge accumulated through years of experience. You've mastered the complex calculations of when to fight, when to flee, and when to nap. Knowing when to rest peacefully reflects deep trust in your threat detection systems and strategic positioning. Young antelopes seek your advice with earnest desperation, treating you like a living encyclopedia of savanna survival knowledge. You must translate years of intuitive understanding into useful guidance, teaching grass evaluation skills, danger sound identification, and environmental awareness that can't be simply memorized. The patience of age manifests when watching youngsters make the same mistakes you did, with the same confidence and resistance to advice you once possessed. You've learned that wisdom cannot be inherited, but must be earned through personal experience. You've seen dozens of seasons cycle through their eternal dance, and these patterns have transformed from survival challenges into something approaching poetry. Your relationship with seasons has evolved from reactive response to proactive participation in collaborative natural processes. The graceful transition toward your story's end unfolds with understated dignity. You recognize approaching conclusion through reduced energy levels and shifting priorities from future planning toward present experience. Your preparation includes ensuring knowledge transfer to successors and finding peace with having fulfilled the essential requirements of antelope existence. The eternal dance continues with new participants. Your legacy persists through biological descendants, shared knowledge, and community contributions. The grass remains, seasons continue, and young antelopes stumble through early challenges with the same determination that characterized your beginning. The story continues because you played your part well,